There she blows. The clapper, ladies and gentlemen.
Clapper's back.
So I was asking you before we started, John, what city or state or country you're in. So you're back, baby.
Yeah, that's right. Yesterday I was in three, Pete. I was in Spain, I was in Switzerland, and now we landed yesterday evening in Chicago. So I am still in Chicago.
Nice.
And Chicago's not so bad. It's a lot cooler than it was overseas, I'll tell you that.
There's been heat everywhere, man. It's been absolutely outrageous. They were talking about it again on the radio stations, the TV stations today. I mean, it's just getting crazy. Speaking of which, because of that, there's a lot going on, John, and let me tell you something. It is, I don't know what's going on with bees. I don't know if you see them, but wasps and bees. So here, let me show you. There's this mitt. You know why this thing looks so thick? Because it's swollen. I got attacked by wasps when I was killing all these nests, and this son of a gun is almost double the size.
I can tell.
It's brutal.
Yeah. Well, I see you're wearing your Viking gear too. Does that mean you were up at training camp?
No, not today, but I was invited to go, but it's raining, so I had no interest at all. They can have it. The hell with them.
Yeah, that's one thing I never. Of course, they don't do two-a-days anymore anyway, Pete.
No, they're so.
But I always hated that, putting on the wet shoulder pads and pulling your helmet back on and having all the sweat drip down from the morning's practice. That's always a treat.
Yeah.
While you're stretching and getting ready to do it again.
That's when people actually practiced, by the way.
Yeah, that's when they really practiced. But we are getting ready to do it again, and we thank you for joining us. I am John Najarian. He is Pete Najarian. Jared is handling all of the dancing animals that you see on the screen. Mm-hmm. Today, it's probably more bulls than bears because the markets have been seeing a pretty nice lift most of the session, Pete. Now, the S&P up 18 and the Dow kind of flat. That tells you the difference between what's in those two. The NASDAQ up 94. And that's a shocker to me, Pete, because interest rates are pretty high. But I guess we get to cover all of that in the show.
Yeah, let's hit the macro minute. I'm ready, Rocket. Let's do it.
All right. Macro minute, retail sales. We've got a preview into how Americans are dealing with the inflation. And we're going to be getting reports this week from Home Depot, Target, and Walmart, Pete. What's your part of the macro minute?
Well, the 10-year's on the rise, Bitcoin's on the rise, crude oil is kind of back and forth, but it's up to, it hit 83. It's been higher than that in the last few days, but it's back up towards 83, somewhere between 82.5, 83. But it's the semiconductors. I don't know why, John, but all of a sudden I'm looking and I'm like, what's really driving this thing? And you take a look at NVIDIA and AMD and Texas Instruments and Micron and all of those. I'm making that the macro because that particular quote-unquote sector is absolutely ripping today.
Well, we could pick any number of things, Pete, for the next topic, which is fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
There she is.
That's right. So we could pick the 10-year, and I know you probably are doing that. We don't discuss it before the show, folks, because the 10-year exploded all the way over 420 this morning. It's down 0.5% right now to 414, but you know, the fact that we've been holding over 4 for such a period of time means it's going to be tough on the market, even if we're seeing a bit of a rally today. We'll have to see exactly what kind of market we get if indeed we top the 52-week high, which is 433. But it does seem like we're certainly targeting that, Pete, as we back and fill on the way up. What do you got?
It's been sticky. It's been above 4. We've had one dip in August below there, but it didn't stay there, but it got back under 4. But here we are once again, as you're pointing out. I think that's huge. The other thing, I'm going to jump a different direction. I'm going to say the dollar, because the dollar's at the highest levels that we've seen since June. It's back up above 103. Something to keep an eye on as well. Now, usually some of these things that John and I are talking about are triggers for more selling. And so today it just shows you the powerhouse of the NASDAQ. And I think a lot of that is contributed by what we're seeing from the semiconductors as well. So is it just one area? Not necessarily, but that is the most prevalent area, I think, right now that's absolutely lifting the NASDAQ at this point, up 94 points, like you said.
Yeah, pretty strong performance.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that 4%, and I got to believe, Pete, a lot of that came as the market came off that 421 high for the Treasury. All right, let's talk about U.S. Steel. Why? Well, because they're only up 32.5%. The stock is screaming to the upside on very heavy turnover. 50 million shares changing hands, Pete, versus a normal of about 6 million shares. And this is because Cleveland Cliffs came at them with a unsolicited bid of about $7.5 billion. What do you think of the bid?
It's unbelievable. It's shocking, actually. And apparently not shocking enough for U.S. Steel. They immediately, John, gave them the Heisman. In other words, they put their hand out and said, nope, no interest at all. Yep. We're gonna go to other strategic alternatives. I don't know exactly what those are, and I don't know who else would be out there shopping for them, John. But, we're talking about two massive companies that if combined, I mean, the one issue you might have to wonder about is that's going to be the entire auto for the U.S. is going to come from one company if this were to come together. It hasn't, but I'll tell you what, X is looking pretty sticky up where it is. And now the fact that didn't have to put out the $7.5 billion bucks, take a look at Cliffs, which is absolutely ripping as well, John.
Yeah, and we had unusual activity, folks. We love to cite these things, but when we see unusual activity, in this case, it was in the September 16 calls, Pete. They were buying those just last week. Checked on X as well. We had unusual activity in X, but unfortunately, those calls expired on Friday. It was a very short-term trade. Somebody came flying in there and bought some calls in X, U.S. Steel. But the big one was they were buying calls in CLF. And that one has certainly paid off big because they've more than doubled. I think they just hit like 94 cents, Pete. People were entering at 40 last week. So that's better than a double. You got to like it. And remember, if you want a BOGO on that, go to marketrebellion.com /BOGO. That's /bang. Sorry. For a BOGO. That's marketrebellion.com /bang. Yep. And you'll get 1 month you'll pay for it. The other month is on us. So not a better deal than that out there with any other service. And none of them have the hits that we've got, Pete.
And that one, John, by the way, was highlighted by us, you and myself, as far as some of the unusual. We go through it, literally go through all of the unusual that we see. But there's so much on there that you've got to select. And I think that this one made a lot of sense. We didn't know anything about what was going on behind the scenes, but certainly Cliffs, once they didn't get that, the stock just started ripping back up to the upside, John. And as you said, 40 cents up to 99 was the high I've seen so far. It's a pretty nice jump, pretty nice results in, let's see, that was last Thursday.
Yeah, I hate it when you have to wait 3 days for something to work out.
Sucks.
Kidding, of course. Let's talk about AMC, Pete. AMC, of course, no, it wasn't because of what's going on at the theaters this time. Instead, it was what's going on with the judge, because the judge said that the movie theater chain can indeed sell additional shares of its stock. That's not a shock. But for some, they were very surprised. And that means, of course, if you have the same supply and demand picks up, well, you're going to see prices higher. If you have increased supply and the demand stays constant, you're going to see prices down because you got too much supply. That's what people are worried about. And that's why we're seeing the stock down over 30%, bang, like that today, Pete.
Getting hammered pretty good, John. And I'll even just go back to the most recent fundamentals even. I mean, so you've got this end of it for sure. But when you still haven't been able to capture, you're still 30% below what they were doing attendance-wise pre-pandemic, and they still are struggling with that. there's a lot more struggles going on, and a lot of it has to do with, well, we've got strikes going on. That certainly hasn't helped, but we've got a lot of different things going on in the media world right now that's causing some of this. But outside of that, it's also been what movies that have come out haven't been as exciting as people maybe expected, outside of maybe a select 2 or 3. But I think that's part of the problem as well, John. And by the way, how about the 1-for-10 split, reverse split that they want to do as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of, some people would call it manipulation, Pete. Others would call it financial engineering. Yep. But whatever you want to call it, if you're trying to take your APES stock, APE, because they, of course, created that as part of this deal, that's up today, but it's not up as much as the other one's down. And I'm thinking this whole thing is a little bit too much engineered to be really a serious contender for people that want to invest. All right, let's take a look now at Hawaiian Electric. Pete loves the island of Hawaii. He's been there, I think, for 40 some odd years out of the last 45 years. I think only in the last couple of years have you not been there, Pete.
Pandemic, that's it.
Yep, well, and maybe it's a good thing for any of us that you weren't there now, because, of course, that fire that started and wiped out Lahaina on the island of Maui, part of those Hawaiian Island chains, now they're saying that a number of attorneys are lined up creating a class to go after Hawaiian Electric, which is down 33%, Pete, because they say it's probably that one of their power lines sparked and caused this horrible loss of life, over 100 people, and as much as $6 billion in repair to have to come in. And a bunch of Hawaiians are worried, of course, that a bunch of people will come in and basically scoop up the properties right out from under them.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation, John. I mean, our heart goes out to those people, and a lot of people are doing GoFundMes and all kinds of different things, trying to do what they can for these wonderful people over there that unfortunately got hit with this. And if it is Hawaiian Electric, which it sure sounds like it is, I mean, that's the lawyers are lining up, as you said. How about the fact that the stock is now at the lowest level, 52-week lows? It's also 13-year lows the stock is hitting. So it gives you a bit of an idea of just how awful this is, what people are expecting. And they probably are correct in what they're expecting in terms of what you were just putting out there. By the way, a couple different firms out there putting out some price targets that are significantly lower than they were. Wells Fargo was one of them. Morningstar was another one. So they're on top of this thing as well. It's so sad. And it's, the prayers go out for everybody, but the death side of it is just, it's just brutal. And the fact that the time frame of everything and how it's played out has been awful. And that's been something that a lot of Minnesotans have followed, because to your point, John, I've been going to Hawaii for a lot of years, probably been there 46 of the last 50 years. And I'm not unusual for the Minnesota community there. There's a lot of folks who like to take a little time off in winter and get to the beautiful islands. Right now, Lahaina's not looking so beautiful, and they need a lot of help.
Yeah, they do. And they got $100 million, Pete, from coming their way from Jeff Bezos and his fiancée, Lauren Sanchez. That's awesome. Oprah says she's going to give money. A bunch of the stars that frequent the island, I suppose Zuckerberg, since he is over there, Larry Ellison's over there. You got to think a lot of them will, dig down a little deep and put up a decent sized number. But U.S. government's already asking for $13 billion, Pete, which kind of is surprising to me that they're saying 13 when they're saying the rebuild is 6. So
it is the government.
Yeah. In other words, it's going to take twice as much money just to filter down through a lot of fingers, which usually is what goes on in any disaster, sadly. Yep. All right, let's talk about Monday.com. This is a software player. They reported 41 cents versus just 14 cents, which was expected. The revenue numbers were also better than expected, and they raised guidance, Pete. That's the triple play when you talk about good news, and that's why the stock's up double digits.
Yeah, when you see somebody who is able to have revenue the way they're driving it, John, year over year up 42%. Their customer growth rate is at 63%. So everything is clicking for them right now. As a matter of fact, they raised the full year, and it would be at 58 cents, 180% better year over year. So there's a lot of things when you look through this report that you've just got to be smiling. It's an Israeli company. They got everything in the cloud world and all this type of thing. Using they use the word or the two letters AI. That still does work, but they didn't need to, John. It's done. They did really, really well, and it's an incredible quarter for us. I have not seen a company put up a quarter like this. I don't know how many different earnings runs that we've had. I haven't seen anything quite like this. This is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, MNDY rather. MNDY is the symbol, folks. Normal activity in the name is about 900,000. It's traded close to double that already. And as Pete said, it's an Israeli company that's also traded here. So $8.2 billion behemoth. That's a pretty big move for these guys. All right. What do you say, Pete, about a little sports?
Well, let's hit a little bit of NFL, John. Now, preseason, we all know it's kind of a joke. A lot of people wish it didn't even exist, but they're wrong on that front, because at some point you've got to have live hitting and seeing how people react when they're down, when they're this, when they're that. How are they thinking? You've got to do it. Now, I understand you're resting your starters. Everybody knows that going in. You know Aaron Rodgers is not playing in the Hall of Fame game, first preseason game of the year. We all know that. And none of the starters most likely will play until maybe the fourth preseason game. And even then, it's questionable. But the one thing that I find really intriguing is Stetson Bennett. You and I think, both agree on this. We watched him in college. The kid had an unbelievable career at Georgia. The last 2 years, all he did was he won 2 national titles. Now, I grant you, they got a great offensive line, great receivers, great running backs, great linebackers, great D-line, great DBs. We all know that. But for whatever reason, he gets passed over, John. He's a 4th-round draft pick. So he goes out there the other night, this Chargers against the Rams, right? He lights it up. I mean, he really did, and his arm looked good. He's small, let's be honest. He's under 6 foot. He's about 190 pounds. But you know what? You might want to look at the first player in the draft as well and see what his size is and what his hands look like and everything else. They're very, very similar. So I don't know. It's interesting. But what I really, really thought was interesting about the game, John, so how about this? Justin Herbert has now been in the league for 3 years. This will be his 4th year. He turned 25 in March. Stetson Bennett, it turns 26 in October. He's a rookie. So you want to talk about just an amazing thing, how old the guy is and how young versus Justin. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. But I think he's old. But would that bother you? If you're a GM, is that something that's going to stop you? Or are you going to say, you know what? It's no different than grabbing some other player who's been on this roster for 3 years. He hasn't played other than preseason anyway. I mean, that's the way I view it. How about you?
I view it the same. In fact, there was a kid that played wide receiver out of Canada. And then he came out and he was trying to make it on an NFL team, and he didn't. I think it was the Giants, Pete. I'm not positive of that. But then he went back up to Canada, played in Canada. So now he is in a similar position. He's been out of college for 3 years, played at Ohio. Not Ohio State, but the University of Ohio. Mm-hmm. And now the kid, he made one of the greatest throws that we've seen. It looked just like what you saw from Mahomes. He's scrambling out of the pocket. Guys are pursuing him. He's running to his left. He's got a guy draped all over him, and still he manages to fire a dart into the end zone, probably about a 26-yard score, I think, something like that. And I don't think 26 is an age, 25 or whatever, is an age that we have to be worried about these guys being too old. I think that's experience. I don't think that's old. I think if you're Tom Brady, 44 is old. And God bless him that he played that long. But that would be almost 20 years more than these guys. And I think there's a lot of talent. And if you got the talent, that's all that matters.
John, so I'm going to jump off to sticking with football because right now baseball's in this odd little position that they're in, and everybody's trying to sort through this whole thing. And they've had trade deadlines, all the rest of it. And now everybody's trying to play it all out. But there are some great teams and some great games being played in baseball. But college football is less than 2 weeks away. So August 26th at 1:30 is the game, I think, of that night, because there's about 8 or 9 games going in there, and I'm really looking forward to it. John, it's Navy and Notre Dame playing over in Dublin, and I think that will be a really, first of all, it's always interesting because Navy is a team, like many of the service academies, where because of the offense they run, a lot of people have a very difficult time with them because they haven't had time to prepare. Well, Notre Dame, it's their first game, so they got time to prepare. So we'll find out right away if they're deserving of being ranked number 13. I actually think they might even be better than that, John. They've got that quarterback that came from Wake Forest, Sam Hartman. Well, he's thrown 77 touchdown passes and over 8,000 yards in the last 2 years. I mean, the guy has been absolutely spectacular at Wake Forest. He can have a 6th year. He said, what the heck? And now he's at Notre Dame. And by the way, John, they've got 3 linemen at Notre Dame right now that are all projected for potentially first round. The biggest of which is our buddy, and you and I have talked about him before, but John Alt, who's from Minnesota, played at Iowa, Kansas City. His son, Joe, looks just like his dad. He's 6'9", 335 pounds, and can run like a deer. I mean, he was a tight end. He was even a quarterback until his dad said, hey, look, you're way too big to be either of those two things, man. You're an offensive tackle. And he is. And he's probably the best one in college football, John. So I think Notre Dame is going to be able to show us whether or not they should be ranked higher or maybe even lower. But I'm expecting higher after we get through this Navy game.
Yeah, God, Pete. It used to be when you played the service academies, you were respectful of the service academy, but you pretty much trounced them. And then Notre Dame started having trouble with a number of them. And I don't think this coaching staff, with the talent that you've just described on offense alone, and they have a pretty damn good defense as well, Pete, I don't think Navy can put up numbers at all against these guys. I think, Navy will be very lucky to get more than a touchdown in this game. Even though they're both on the road, like you say, to go over there to Ireland to play the game. But I think it's going to be a great season for Notre Dame. And I have no ties to the school. You and I both know Jeff Kilberg and a number of great players out of there, Joe Montana, and of course, Chris Haynes, who caught the Montana pass that made Joe Montana so famous. But in the game against Houston, I think. But anyway, I think that it's a great program, and I think they'll probably win easily against Navy. That's my prediction, Pete. But I want to end it with this. Your favorite, Ohani, hit his 41st home run. That's American League leading 41st home run, and it was another 448-foot shot. Mm-hmm. So in other words, not like some 372-foot, just makes it over an outfield in a short outfield or something. No, he's drilling these like Bo Jackson used to drill them, Pete. And I don't know how you say anything but just,
Yeah, he's the best. He might, John. I don't know if there's anybody like him, but I have a guy. I'm not kidding you right now. Talked about it yesterday on our sports show. Might have to put him in for tomorrow in one of the 2 sports talk things that we do, because there's a kid who, when I say kid, he's 17 years old. What he's done academically and what the kid's done as a quarterback and what the kid has done as a pitcher, boy, it kind of sounds a little bit like Ohtani. We might have to hit that tomorrow, John.
Well, we should. We definitely should. And by the way, Ellie De La Cruz still cruising along, Pete.
Yeah.
Still freaking lighting them up. And I love to see that kid play with his passion as well. Yep. All right. Thank you for joining us, folks. Remember, you can always get a BOGO if you go to marketrebellion.com/bang. That's marketrebellion.com/bang. And we will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.